staff and members of the public to our first meeting of the People and Places Committee for 2021, and in fact the first of our standing and council meetings for this year. Just before we move into the order of business, I'd like to remind those of you who are here that this is being video recorded. It's being live streamed, as well as it will go on our Facebook page, and a link is on the Facebook page for the agenda. So could we all stand please for our karakia? Tu taua mai I runga, tu taua mai I raro, tu taua mai I roto, tu taua mai I waho, kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. E noho. Okay, are there any apologies, please? Councillor.
Just an apology for early departure. Myself, Councillor Wright and Councillor Crystal need to depart at 15:15.
Right, thank you. Could I have a move and a seconder for those apologies, please? Councillor Brown, Councillor Mawson. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against say no. Thank you. Right, are there any conflicts of interest? Hearing none. There is no public forum, but I just want to take this quick opportunity to tell the public that we do welcome deputations or presentations from the public in this time slot on matters of particular interest and concern. It's a 5-minute presentation that you can make, and you just contact the council at least a day before the meeting you actually want to present to. Right, announcements by the Mayor.
Kia ora koutou. Welcome back, everybody, after our break. I hope everybody had a relaxing time, and it's good to be back for the first official committee meeting of the year. It's interesting, I think we all knew we had a busy year last year and we're in need of a break, and when we had a media inquiry just recently about the number of workshops we've held over the last 3 years, it was surprising in some ways, but not in others, to see the result. So in 2018 we had 48 workshops, in 2019 we had 57 workshops, and last year in 2020 we had 107 workshops. So well done everybody, all the staff, all the councillors. It just goes to demonstrate how busy we were last year with everything that was going on. And it would be fair to say we have another busy year ahead of us this year. We have some current consultations in play, one of which is the Revenue and Finance Policy, of which submissions have closed, and next week we have 4 days of hearings, so we're very much looking forward to hearing from the community members who have made submissions to our Revenue and Finance Policy and the proposed changes that we've made there. Another couple of consultations that are currently open are on the review of our gambling policy and also the review of our psychoactive. Thank you very much. Substances. So if anyone is keen to make a submission on those, I encourage you to go to our Say It Napier site and do that. This year, of course, we're also working on our long-term plan for 2021 to 2031, and we've already come out a couple of times in August of last year and over the Christmas break asking for your input. But the next opportunity where you'll really have an opportunity to provide far more detailed input and feedback will be in April, when we release the draft long-term plan document. So again, encourage you to engage in that when it comes out. And we are also continuing our work on the review of our district plan this year, which we typically only review about every 10 years. It is a very significant piece of work. And again, we will be coming out a little bit later on in the year to ask for you to provide your feedback on that draft document as well. Another review which we're very much looking forward to sharing with you is the chlorine-free review. So we have just last week received the draft copy of that report, and the consultants are now in the process of finalising that, and next month we will be considering that and receiving that report at a formal committee meeting, and that at that time, of course, it will become available for the community to read and have a look at as well. We also have the very exciting news that our new Chief Executive, Steph Rotarangi, will be starting next Tuesday. So looking forward to having her on board and introducing her to not only our staff but the wider community. So in light of that, I would like to take the opportunity to thank our Interim Chief Executive, Keith Marshall, who joined us post-COVID lockdown last May and has done an incredible job holding the fort over the last 9 months, considering some of the challenges that we had last year, not only with COVID, but also, of course, our flooding event in November. So his efforts have been much appreciated, and he has certainly formed some very good working relationships and friendships, I would say, in the time that he's been here. So from me personally and on behalf of all of Council, I would just like to say thank you very much for all that he's done over the last 9 months. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive. Looks like we've got a busy year ahead of us. I don't have any announcements, but I'm calling for notification of minor matters not on the agenda. Councillor Crown.
Yeah, I have 2 minor matters. So for the end?
Just tell me what they are.
Certainly. So one is on the very significant announcement last week from Minister Mahuta around the changes to legislation for Māori wards and that process. And my second item is about the internal review that we signalled to staff back in November last year following the flood.
Cool, thank you very much. Well, we'll come back to these towards the end of the meeting. Thank you for those. Announcements by management.
Yes, through the Chair, the councillors will note that the resolution to exclude the public is not on the agenda. So the Chief Executive has withdrawn that public excluded item, which are the minutes of the last meeting, and that will go on to the next public excluded council agenda.
Thank you. Any other announcements from management? No. Moving on to the confirmation of the minutes. At the minutes of the Napier People and Places Committee held on Thursday, the 5th of November 2020, be taken as a true and accurate record of the meeting. Councillor Mawson moved, Councillor Wright seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
All those against say no. Thank you. It's carried. Right, our one but very significant agenda item is the implementation of dual place names and bilingual signage in council parks, reserves and facilities. And I'd like to ask Charles Ropatini, Strategic Māori Advisor, to talk to us about that. Thank you. It certainly is very appropriate on the eve of Waitangi Day to be discussing this, so thank you for bringing it forward.
Tēnā tātou. Mauri ore ki te rangi ko kohi kaitea, kai tātea mauri ore ki te whenua, ko māti ti kaiwai, mauri ore ki te moana, ko kore piri ki Tangaroa, mauri ore ki a koutou. Aira, ko tēnei te wahanga o te tau, ko te wahanga hei whakanui, hei whakamanamana tō tātou tiriti o Waitangi. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi, ko te kāwanatanga, ko koutou te kāwanatanga o te taonenei. Ko te kaupapa tuarua, ko te tino rangatiratanga, ko te tino rangatiratanga o ngai Māori o te tangata whenua o Aotearoa nei. Ko te kaupapa tuatoru, ko te oritetanga, ko te whenua mo te iwi katoa e noho nei ki Aotearoa. He kaupapa anō, ko te kaupapa tuawhā, ko te kaupapa o te ritenga Māori. Ko tēnei pepa, he pepa I raro I te kaupapa tuarua, ko te tino rangatiratanga, ko tēnei te kaupapa o te reo Māori. Nei rā te mihi mai oha ki runga I ēnei mea o rangi nui ki a papa tuanuku o tō tātou tiriti o Waitangi, tēnā tātou katoa. Tēnā koe e te tiamano o te komiti nei, tēnā koe e te kahika, tēnā tātou ngā kai kaunihera aroha nui ki a koutou. This is the time that we acknowledge our Treaty of Waitangi, Te Treaty of Waitangi. There are 4 articles of Te Treaty o Waitangi. The first article is governorship, and you are the governors of the city. The second is tino rangatiratanga, and the third is oritetanga, which is citizenship. All citizens of New Zealand under the Treaty of Waitangi are welcome here. There is a 4th article, which is an article of religious freedom and protection of Māori custom, ritenga Māori. This paper falls under the 2nd article of the treaty and acknowledges Te Reo Māori as a treasure under the 2nd article, tino rangatiratanga. So this paper is prepared predominantly to rationalise or give an update of our Te Reo Māori touch points that were implemented in the previous triennium and initiated through the previous Māori committee. The purpose of the paper is both to update the current Māori committee of what has happened in the past and yourselves, this committee and council, as to what has happened in the previous triennium with Te Reo Māori and where we're heading to support the development of a Te Reo Māori policy being led by Morihu Te Tomo. The background of this initiation of bilingual signage in public parks and reserves started with McLean Park. And McLean Park was being rebranded with a new suite of signage in 2018. And a workshop took place with the Māori Committee where the suite of signage was presented to the Māori Committee for their thoughts and opinions on what was in front of them. It was immediately noticed that within the full suite of signage, there were only 5 Māori words included. And those Māori words were no mai, haere mai, ki McLean Park. No mai haere mai ki McLean Park. Out of the full suite of signage, that was the presence of Te Reo Māori. So a very uncomfortable conversation took place led by Tiwana Aranui and Piri Prentice to say, out of all of your signage and under the equity of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, only 5 Māori words are included. So while it was uncomfortable, the challenge was put to our team to do what we could to create equity and have equal representation of 2 languages side by side. The initial feedback was that we would complicate signage, that it would be difficult to read and to navigate. However, the need to include bilingual signage simplified the English to accommodate for the Māori, and the outcome was a cleaner set of signage overall, more directional and supporting a better navigation through McLean Park. The outcome is that McLean Park is fully bilingual in all of its signage, which is a huge achievement that our team turned around in a week and represented back to the Māori Committee, who were very satisfied with what they saw. Bilingual signage is predominantly directional. It's not conversational. It tells you what to do, where to go. But in this discussion and development of McLean Park, Piri Prentice was quite clear that with the introduction of the first town plan of Napier in 1855, all Māori place names were replaced with British empirical place names, with the exception of one. The one place name that survived, or actually it didn't survive, it was a new place name, was a place name called Tareha. That's the only Māori place name. So we acknowledge Ngāti Hikawera, Ngāti Pāro, and the descendants of Tareha. With the removal of all of those place names in one stroke of the brush, all memory of Māori history was also replaced. So the report backs up Piri Prentice's statement that we have an obligation to ensure that the memory of our ancestors lives on through reinstatement of Māori place names. And kaumātua of Te Whanganui Aotearoa backed this up in 2007 when they said in an interview, reinstating the original Māori names for significant sites within Te Whanga so that the history could be brought back was a common theme expressed by interviewees. They suggested that some sites could be signposted with the original Māori name, a short whakamārama or explanation about the history, and more plantings of indigenous species, particularly on wāhi tapu, sacred sites. So this paper is an overview of what we have done to date. I'll run through those and present the recommendation at the end. The Māori Committee have seen this paper and have endorsed the recommendations. Questions were asked around the process for engaging mana whenua to capture the stories of Māori place names. Following the adoption of this paper, a process will be developed. The bilingual signage project started with McLean Park. Of course, McLean Park itself, the name is protected by legislation. So although there was a request to change the name cannot actually be changed unless it's with the support of our local politicians. That's not to say that it can't happen, it's to say that there is a process for it to happen, and we could not initiate that process within the bilingual project that we had at hand. Napier libraries and MTG are also use bilingual signage, and in the case of the libraries, there is a national set of vocabulary or a national lexicon that is used by all libraries in the country. This set of vocabulary was developed by Te Rōpū Whakahau, the National Association for Māori Engaged in Libraries, and by using the national lexicon or the national glossary, regardless of what library you are in the country, the language will be consistent. Mana whenua do have their own meta or dialect and their own way of spelling things, and sometimes a specific mana whenua may want to see certain words used outside of the national lexicon, and we can allow for that as well. Our waste minimisation project and the introduction of recycling crates delivered 75,000 bilingual recycling crates to Napier households. Whether they know that they're bilingual or not, I don't know, because we've not had any feedback on it. But we've not had any feedback, good or negative. So zero negative feedback is a KPI in itself, and through osmosis, our language is on every driveway of every household in Napier. The terminology is a national lexicon by Parakore Zero Waste, who is a national collective of enthusiastic people, and by deferring to that national lexicon again, regardless of where you are in the country, you will know the common terminology for zero waste. The temporary customer service centre on Hastings Street also has some bilingual signage. Our Napier City Council website is about 80% bilingual headings only, which were translated by our Te Reo Māori, Director of Te Reo Māori, Jeremy Tātere McLeod. Getting to dual place names for parks and reserves, at the same time that McLean Park dual bilingual signage was being developed, and we started to incorporate national bilingual signage guidelines, the perspective of the Māori Committee was taken into consideration again with our signage renewal projects, and an invitation was given to start looking at reinstating Māori place names alongside the existing English name. The first reserve was West Shore Beach Reserve, which is now known as Te Taha West Shore Beach Reserve. Now, I must state that that's not its legal name. Its legal name is not Te Taha West Shore Beach Reserve. There's a process to go through for that. However, on the sign on the reserve, the name has been reinstated in consultation with our previous Māori committee. Implementing bilingual signage is not a translation of the existing name. So Te Taha does not mean West Shore Beach. There is a quote here from one of our esteemed kaumātua, Heitia Hiha, saying that this is an area where fish processing used to occur. It is the name of the shingle spit enclosing Te Whanganui-a-Rotu and northern side of Ahuriri Heads. So using national guidelines for best practice placement of bilingual signage, you can place Te Reo Māori either on the left and English on the right, or Te Reo Māori above and the English below. So with our Parks and Reserve signage, the Māori name is above and the English name is below. And a very clear point of this project is not to remove English names. That's not the point of the project, but to create equity and memory by adding the Māori name alongside the English name. The dual place names that have been implemented to date are at Marewa Park, Roberts Terrace Reserve, Te Whanga Aspiring Drive Reserve, Tuhina Pō Centennial Gardens, and Karetoki Whare at Sturms Gully, which is about to go in shortly. Some of the key issues that we have in implementing Te Reo Māori here at Napier City Council is that we don't have a Te Reo Māori policy which guides our decision making and process for implementation of Te Reo Māori in our documents or signage. And we do not yet have a process for unknown or unclear place names. What I mean by that is that some place names that were recorded by early European settlers were written incorrectly based on how they sounded. But what the actual name is will require wānanga with mana whenua of that place to ensure that what goes on a sign is correct and approved by mana whenua. We also do not yet have a process for inclusion of cultural intellectual property relating to place names, meaning we do not have the right permissions at this stage to tell the stories behind the names. So although the Māori committee were desirous to see Māori names put in place, we did not discuss having the story associated with the name, but that is definitely the next step. Significance and engagement. This significance comes under the Māori Language Act, which affirms the Māori language is the Indigenous language of Aotearoa. It is a taonga under Article 2 of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and it's our official language that we should celebrate. And we are doing that here in Napier, although the purpose of this paper is to make some of that public. In September last year, during Māori Language Week, in collaboration with our Māori colleagues across councils regionally, we had Te Reo Māori flags flying in parts of the city. Again, a KPI, a successful KPI is zero negative feedback. We received zero negative feedback. I enjoyed sitting on Marine Parade at Six Sisters drinking a coffee one morning while a group of Pākehā girls going to Napier Girls High School walked past. And one of those girls yelled out to her friends, "Me ata haere, Sarah, me ata haere, slow down, Sarah." Now, although the pronunciation wasn't bang on, these girls were engaging in what they saw and are attempting our official language. This paper also proposes that Council adopt the National Māori English Bilingual Guidelines. which have been developed by Te Taurewhiri i Te Reo Māori, the Māori Language Commission, and also by Te Puni Kōkiri. These national guidelines are what have guided our decisions to date in the absence of a Te Reo Māori policy. In terms of financial implications, there has been no additional budget required for the bilingual signage that has been implemented to date, and that is because it has been done alongside existing signage renewal projects and will continue to be a part of the pipeline of signage renewal projects with our marketing team, who I must say have been very supportive, very helpful, and very open to learning about Te Reo Māori processes, and I thank them for that. There is no separate budget for Te Reo Māori initiatives other than forming partnerships internally with our colleagues, as in the cases of our Te Reo Māori flags that we used for Māori Language Week. To create scale, we have been collaborating with our Māori colleagues at other councils so that our financial contribution for these things is lessened through collective bargaining power, essentially. So from here, we're looking at how we assess national lexicons for any other areas that may require national recognition of specific language sets, to adopt the Māori English signage best practice guidelines. There is a risk in those national lexicons which can be addressed through a Te Reo Māori policy to have a process in which to assess the national lexicon. Not all national glossaries are appropriate nationally. For example, the Māori Business Association is based at Waikato University in Hamilton. Their national lexicon is a Tainui dialect. So therefore, it's actually not appropriate in this region because it's noticeably from Tainui Waikato. So a process would need to be developed to assess these national lexicons. In terms of the options available to Council and the Māori Committee, before getting into the options, I will go back to the recommendation at the top of the paper and open for any questions that you might have. What this paper is asking is for the Napier People and Places Committee to A, endorse the report as a consolidation of bilingual signage and dual place names applied to council projects in the previous triennium. To approve the principal Māori advisor to engage mana whenua to capture stories relating to Māori place names reinstated already, with an agreed level of cultural intellectual property made available to the public domain. C, to approve the adoption of the National Māori English Bilingual Signage, a guide for best practice, as the guide for bilingual signage and dual place names. And D, to approve the use of National Te Reo Māori lexicons for libraries and parakore waste, with a process developed for accepting national lexicons for future bilingual projects. I'm happy to take any questions.
May I ask a question, Charles? Thank you for this very comprehensive and exciting paper. In terms of implementing the recommendations once they've carried and have gone through the full council meeting, will there be an opportunity to report back, or what sort of time frame might there be in reporting back in terms of progress in achieving some of these dual place names?
So I would expect after I have the full pipeline of place names that we need to look towards for the future, we do need to engage mana whenua for those place names. So the first step is to work with Morihu to complete the Te Reo Māori policy, in which we will be reporting back to the Māori Committee, this committee and council. Of course, there are challenges in defining time and effort to engage mana whenua. Although in saying that the cultural intellectual property for the stories for these place names have been captured through the district plan review. So through the district plan review that we're going through at the moment, we capture the significance of sites Many of them are in public reserves, and that cultural intellectual property is sitting there. We do not have the permission to use that cultural intellectual property for this purpose. So time could be sped up by engaging around cultural intellectual property through the district plan review and to apply it here. And that's a case of actually publishing the story on the public domain like our website, not so much to retrospectively smack up QR codes on the signage, although that could be an option as well. And we're yet to have any discussion about wider cultural landscape mapping. So we will be reporting back. I'm happy to take any suggestions on what you would like to see in reporting back to this committee and of course the Māori committee. However, most of that reporting will be in the context of the Te Reo Māori policy that's being developed.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll be very interested and supportive of progress in this, Charles, so do keep us posted. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Tāpene.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greetings, Charles. Thank you for that comprehensive report. It summarises well a number of years of work, actually, which has culminated in what you've presented to Council today. My question is around if we're looking to do this gradually in alignment with our business as usual practices around our signage replacement or updating process, are there any other financial implications that we should be cognizant of as council? Because I'm conscious that the term wānanga, I see on Te Tai Whenua's website we have 7 hapu registered there, so there's going to be a need to engage with them. Are we confident that, given the constraints coming forward, that there's sufficient space for us to be able to meet adequately with those groups and engage effectively so that we can take that journey together?
Yes, I am confident that we're resourced to be able to do that. Of course, we will. I must say that the names that have been implemented to date are we've exhausted the list that has been approved to use. So from here, any other signage will require appropriate engagement with the appropriate mana whenua. I'm assured that we do have budget to develop a Te Reo Māori policy in which engagement for place names will come from that budget as part of developing that Te Reo Māori policy. That policy is critical because that will define the decision-making process that will follow with mana whenua. So until we've got that process defined, I can't anticipate what the ongoing costs will be for engagement into Te Reo Māori.
Supplementary. So just for my own clarity, so because we had a set range of options to consider with signage, and we're only replacing a few, that level of complexity wasn't there? Is it because we're having to engage effectively with mana whenua and draw on those historical stories that before we can move forward? Is that what you're talking around, that extra complexity in the work? In other words, why do we need to develop the Te Reo policy if we used the National Māori and English guidelines? What's the advantage for us there?
The advantage of using the National Te Reo Māori policy, Te Reo Māori guidelines, is that we're following best practice in placement of dual language, 2 languages side by side. So that sets the placement and the direction. What it doesn't describe is how we should engage with our mana whenua on the ground. It just literally says how to place logos and words. The policy is the process of the engagement to get the appropriate words and the appropriate names in which the guidelines say how to place them.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any other questions or comments? Just one comment, Charles. When we give names to new roads and developments and things like that, we have quite a separate process that the developer themselves have a selection of names to use. And I wondered if there was any, this is, dual names for existing places. Was there any interest, do you think, in the Māori community of having input into council names for new streets or new parts of the city?
Absolutely. That process is not well defined. The current process is for the developer of a development to engage with mana whenua for suggestions, which are then put forward to council. But we do need to provide guidance for external developers on how to go about engaging with mana whenua, and also to communicate to developers that it's not appropriate to bring in sets of names, generic names of lakes and rivers, mountains, birds from other areas. So at the moment there is no policy guidance on that. We know through our National Māori Managers Network that it is a national issue around naming, and it is on the radar for our Te Reo Māori policy.
Excellent, thank you. Right, if there are no further questions or comments, could I please have a mover and a seconder for the officers' 4 recommendations? Do you want me to read them out, or are you comfortable with them that they're in front of you? Oh, perhaps I better read them out. The officer's recommendation that the Napier People and Places Committee A endorse the report as a consolidation of bilingual signage and dual place names applied to council projects over the 2017 to 2019 triennium. B, approve the principal Māori advisor to engage mana whenua to capture stories relating to Māori place names reinstated to parks and reserves with an agreed level of cultural intellectual property made available to the public domain. C, approve the adoption of the National Māori English Bilingual Signage, a guide for best practice, as the guide for bilingual signage and dual place names. And D, approve the use of National Te Reo Māori lexicons for libraries and parakore zero waste, with a process developed for accepting national lexicons for future bilingual projects. Is there a mover? Councillor Crown. Is there a seconder? Mayor Wise, would you like to speak to it? Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's a fantastic capture of all the work that has been done over the last few years to establish a standard and a process moving forward. I think the really important thing, and I think that Councillor Tapini touched on this before, was that it's happening in parallel with the development of a policy, and a policy which will reflect the dialect and the hapu, the language of the people of our area, of Aotearoa. And I think that that's a really important part of it. So, I think it's a shame that no negative feedback is a KPI, but we'll look to move forward from that, I think, and celebrate the language of this land. So, yeah, kia ora.
Anybody else like to speak? There's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say no. The recommendation is carried. Thank you very much.
Happy Waitangi Day.
Right, we have 2 minor matters, and just to reiterate what we can do with these minor matters. We may discuss an item that's not on the agenda only if it's a minor matter relating to the general business of the meeting, and that I've explained it will be discussed. However, the meeting may not make a resolution, decision or recommendation about the item except to refer it to a subsequent meeting for further discussion. So, Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, at the beginning of this hui, we heard Mayor Wise talk us through the number of consultations and engagement opportunities with our communities that we're currently working through this year, and we are pretty heavy on that stuff. But I think that with the significance of the legislation change around the Māori ward situation, that it is something that as a council we need to consider and ask or signal to our staff that there is an expectation that we are provided with information and some resource on this topic so that we are able to engage with our community effectively and form an informed decision about what is best for our council and for our people moving forward. So that's the reason why I wanted to raise it today, just to signal that I think that is a worthwhile topic for us to be applying some resource for. It has the ability to affect the makeup of who sits around the table. It would affect the different wards set up as it is. There are a number of ways that we're trying to more effectively engage with mana whenua, hapu, iwi anyway. So it's it's another opportunity to kind of bend our arm and figure out how best to do those things. And I think that it is very much worthy of some priority for us.
Any other discussion about that?
I'll just, if I might, through Madam Chair. So thank you, Councillor Crown. I do remember the last time this was brought before Council, as those returning councillors remember. It was a contentious question. The feedback was particularly horrible to read through, and I thought it was a really, really unfortunate process to ask our city to go through. And I remember at the time recommending to Council that when we reapproach this question, how we approach that with our community will be critical, and that we should be cognizant that it's an opportunity for us to really define this space for us rather than divide ourselves. So I'd be really keen to see a report around how we're going to approach this, how we're going to engage with our community, what the question is we're putting out there, and more importantly, how we're going to provide or enable particularly our 7 hapu to be able to engage actively in this process. What's their position on Māori wards? Do they even want them? We don't know. So I would really love to see a paper come from our staff as to how we're going to approach this and how we can guide our city through a conversation which historically has been divisive. So I'd love to see us walk out of the fog, hand in hand, singing tātou tātou e, rather than previous experiences. So thank you for bringing it to the table, and I hope that we're able to pick up on some of our learnings from the last time we had this question. Kia ora.
Any other discussion? This has been, what happened was, there's been a change in central government policy on this, which has enabled the deadline for councils across the country to decide one way or the other about Māori wards. I think the deadline is the middle of May, so previously it had been a decision that had to be made last year. So it is an opportunity, and I think there will be an expectation that for us to discuss it. So thank you for that recommendation for a subsequent meeting for further discussion. Thank you. And your other item?
And my other minor matter, through the chair, I'm just wondering whether it's actually appropriate anymore, given that this, I'd had notification that the director of our Richard Munaka would be here today, but he isn't, just to give us an update in regards to an internal review on our processes in regards to the flood. It was something that was raised in a November meeting. I think it was our first meeting after that, raised by Councillor Wright. And I know that the end of last year was incredibly busy, so I just wanted to make sure that it's still sort of on the horizon for us, and that our staff are aware that it's a priority also.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Through the chair, yeah, last year was an incredibly busy time, and then of course we've all had our annual leave, so a lot of the people who have been involved in the response have had considerable time off, including myself. I took a month off. So Richard Munaka has really been behind the recovery. In terms of a review of the response, Council's response and the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Emergency Management response, there was talk at the end of the last year, when we were actually still heavily in response mode, about an independent review led by the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group. So I can chase up as to where that is, because we will need to feed into that that review quite considerably. So and just as an aside, we have just finished, completed our debrief survey, so our Civil Defence Emergency Management Advisor is just collating that information.
And yes, the Chief Executive would like to comment. Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Further to Antoinette's update, the Chief Executive and Mayors and Chairs met last week, and the independent review of the civil defence process, both the operations of the office, but also looking at not just the flood event, but also the COVID response, drought response, is currently getting shaped up with the terms of reference to be progressed, and that will be done independent of the civil defence and NEMA and our own responses, just to make sure that there's that independence. So that's getting framed up at the moment as a terms of reference, and we'll see that in due course.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, just through the chair. Will that review cover our infrastructure response for the first few days?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Tapine.
Do we know with the independent review and either the civil defence review whether how we were able to network with our community groups in addressing the social needs during that period will be catered for?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Any further discussion? Councillor Brown.
Just that I understand there was a meeting yesterday at 1 o'clock with the other organisations that were involved in the response. I was just wondering if we could get an update on what their feedback on their review was at a later date.
I'm not aware of that meeting, sorry.
Okay. I'm not sure of the details of who was involved, but I'm pretty sure there was one.
There is a meeting which is concurrent with this one around the recovery group taking place right now.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Is there an opportunity for the public to give input into the review?
I don't.
No.
We haven't got the terms of reference
Okay,
yet. So.
right. We'll wait for Mr Monarchy, who'll be able to provide that information.
Well,
hopefully.
that review will be commissioned through the Chief Executives and Mayors and Chairs group. So.
Okay, thank you. Right. Any further discussion on that?
Just to reiterate your point, if I may, Madam Chair, could we encourage the opportunity for our residents to be able to contribute in some form? Or would that be inappropriate given the level of this assessment? That's a whole level of engagement and
I'm
complexity.
happy to feed that into the process. I honestly don't know because the terms of reference development isn't at that stage yet. So.
Right, thank you. All right, well, if there's no further discussion and as we don't have any public excluded items, I'd like to thank you all and declare the meeting closed.
Thank you.